Welcome to our homestead, welcome to our garden. The winter time or fall time is not the time of year most people think about working in their garden. However, there are so many valuable things that can be done in the garden in the fall and winter that will give you just a springboard for that spring planting that is coming up sooner than you think. Today I'm talking about 5 very valuable and important things that I'm doing right now in preparation for our spring planting. Let's talk about those. So you're asking me, how is this going to help me grow more food in the spring? Well, many of you have very short growing seasons and we are all very busy. So getting a jump start is extremely important. If you're waiting till spring to do the things that I'm going to show you today, then you're losing time in your garden, time that can be used to growing food. So one of the first things you need to do is to remove all of the old dead foliage and plant material from the garden. Now, what I'm going to do with this material is take it to be composted. But I'm going to do something very specific here at the soil line, and let me show you that. Now, when we are removing our old plant material, we're going to cut it off right at the soil line. The reason for doing this is to leave those roots in the ground. That plant material that's below the ground is going to help feed the soil. It's going to break down, it's going to provide food for the microbes in the soil. And that's ultimately just going to help you build soil. What will happen also is once that plant material, that root system breaks down, it will help aerate the soil. So water and air is going to get down where those roots were. It won't take very long for that material to break down, especially here at the beginning of winter and late fall. Now, like I said, just clip these off directly at the top of the soil. It's okay if it sits out here a little bit or sticks out a little bit. Okay, the next job is to remove all debris from your garden beds, like your plant markers, stakes, anything like that, all your twine or your trellising material, whatever it is. We need to get this out of here so it's not such a big job in the spring. Now, a lot of people will take that plant material and use it as a mulch on their beds for the winter, and that is okay. However, you need to really understand per your area the soil temperatures, because if you live in a cooler climate, then that mulch is going to hold that soil temperature down in the spring. And for germinating and getting plants going in the spring, you really want that soil temperature higher. So you're really going to have to make a judgment call per where you live. For us here in the South, I can let all this material sit on top of the bed and break down over the winter with no problem. But I do like to get it into our compost pile and get it making that compost a little bit quicker over there instead of using it as a mulch over here. So I do want to mention, if you're mulching with your old material, of course remove anything with seeds, or you're going to have volunteers coming up everywhere that you don't want them. Also, mulching in the fall and winter is going to help with weed suppression. And that's actually really important here in the South. Because of our mild winters, we have a lot of winter weeds that get into the garden, and they grow throughout the winter, and it's always a big task to get those out in the springtime before we replant. Speaking of weeds, it's also very important to get out those weeds that have already gone to seed, that have grown up after you've harvested your last harvest. So in this area right here, we had beans and melons. We had a lot of grasses come up between them, and we didn't get to them when we probably should have. So removing them now is going to go a long way for saving you time in spring, so that you're able to plant in here as quickly as possible. You can see it in contrast here with our old bean plants and the grasses that did get into the garden. This is coming up in between them, so we need to get that out as well. And then we are going to remove all of this dead debris. And look, I even have an oak tree growing in my garden. Now, along with removing things like the stakes and the vegetable tags, taking your trellises out, if you move them every year like we do and rotate crops, is a huge job that should be done now, because this takes a long time to get these things together and set in the spring. So as we are moving our trellises, getting our T-posts out of the ground, cleaning up the weeds, the debris, and things like that, there's another important thing that we need to think about, and that's our water system. The next one goes without saying, but that's getting your water lines picked up, rolled up, drained, all the ends opened up, just so you don't have any splits, anything freezing in your lines in the wintertime. Get your hydrants turned off and everything taken care of right now, because if you wait till spring, you're probably going to be replacing some lines. And for us, just letting them lay here in the garden bed is okay if they're totally drained out. But if they're not, get them elevated, get that water out of there, and you'll be good to go. If you have a newer area in your garden, or you have an area that has gotten completely overrun with the weeds, a good thing to do at this point now is cover it with a silage tarp. What that tarp is going to do is kill off most of what's underneath that tarp. And that is going to make it a lot easier and a lot more manageable in the springtime. What you want to do halfway through the wintertime, take the tarp off and use a flame weeder to flame down and try to kill any extra weeds that have stayed under there, or the seeds. You want to burn those seeds out and then recover it. It's what urban farmer Curtis Stone calls making a stale seed bed. And we've done a video on that before. You can check it out at the top of the screen. These things make my life out here in my area of the country a lot easier because we have such a high pressure from hay grasses. They blow in on the wind, they come in with the birds, and they are brutal to try and get out of your garden. So what we're going to do next is amend our soil. Whether that's adding compost or some sort of organic fertilizer, you have to make the choice. It depends on how old your bed is. If it's a young bed, you might need a little bit of organic fertilizer. We use Sustain, this 464 organic fertilizer. We also use, since this is an established bed already, we use a mixture of our compost, which has got some goat manure in it. It's got composted vegetables and leaves and a lot of worm droppings. Worm droppings? Worm compost? Worm poop? What do you call that stuff? Castings, that's it. We use a lot of worm castings that we do make here on our property. So when we're preparing our bed, we will use a garden fork, just a regular old garden fork. This is one of my favorite tools, and Paul Gauchi uses this a lot for his Back to Eden garden. We're just going to rake it gently over the first top inch of the soil. The beautiful thing about the garden fork is if you have to smooth it out, just flip it over. And you can really easily knock down any ridges or any piles that you have and make it a nice smooth bed. And for us, this doesn't have to be perfect. Since this isn't a market garden, we're just going to lay out our new compost at only about a ½ inch thick. We're not really worried about even rows right now. I have a good idea of where the rows kind of are in this big bed, but this is where we grow things a lot that really don't need to be tended to perfectly with walk paths and stuff like that, so it's not that big of a deal. And if your soil needs it, which ours normally does, we add some kelp meal, which is a good shot of potash. Pretty easy to put on, just a couple of handfuls. It's pretty potent. So one of the last things I'm going to do for the winter is chop down our cover crops. It's going to give that material that I just chopped an opportunity to break down into the soil. My preferred method is just a weed whacker. Now these steps to do during the late fall and early winter are really important, especially for you southern gardeners. And that is because our off-season, our winter, our non-planting season is so short. It's only about 2 months, give or take. I know down here in Texas in Zone 8B, I will already be planting in late February. Last year, I still had tomatoes ripening in the garden in early December. So even though you're saying to yourself after your harvest is done is, whew, I can relax for a few minutes, that's not the case. Do the work ahead of time in that late fall and early winter, and it's going to make your spring a lot easier. Now go check out this video right here, which talks about all the benefits of owning a greenhouse and how it'll help you grow year-round no matter where you're at. Have a beautiful, blessed day. We'll see you next time. Bye.